Thanks, Amir. Thanks for having me on, Victor. Looking forward to chat. Yeah, so my name is Lindbergh Montaliano. I'm the Director of Cost Optimization at Avalara. And I'm actually a big foodie, as Amir referred to. So I'm looking forward to FinOps X and all of the food there, especially a food tour. That's one of my favorite things to do when I visit a city. So if anyone's going to FinOps X, hopefully I'll see you there. Introduce yourself. Would love to hear, about your journeys, your challenges, your successes. So we can, all succeed together.
That's awesome, man. That's great.
Great.
Okay, so then let's start. Let's kick it off the summit with today's first session, the $1 million FinOps policies. I will be doing it as Omer said, Limber and me, and I will set the floor to Limber. So we can start with the first one is going to be value for every slide. So please stay ready to take some notes. Yeah, let's kick it off, Limber. Let me.
Great. All right. So what is a policy, right? So really a policy either written down or encoded is a set of rules that identify current waste, potential waste, any efficiencies. It helps drive controls based on business goals and best practices. And it most importantly enables continuous cloud optimization. So oftentimes policies run post-deployment or in the earliest stages. So some key elements about policies, there's resource types, dependent, cloud platforms, various conditions and filters, and exceptions. And if you write your policy really, really well, it's actually consists of multi-step actions and workflows to further automate the process. So we're going to talk through various policies that have saved hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars when applied. This information is, gathered from various experiences, as well as from other teams and individuals that I've talked to. So next slide. So this is really a no-brainer. I think a lot of people, a lot of teams and organizations do this where they will set off our policies on the weekends or after the day ends to turn off development resources and then automatically turn them on the next day, right? So if you really think about it, there's probably 2 days out of the week that you're probably not working unless you're a workaholic like me, but most cases you're probably not working. And if you count, let's say you work 10 hours a day, you have 14 hours you can just turn off stuff, right? So that, when you add it up, amounts to real world savings, especially when compute is charging you by the minute, right? So every minute counts. So then back on is a real savings opportunity. So some tips and best practices you see here. You want to educate your teams about off hours. You want to obviously communicate it out to them. You don't want to accidentally turn something off while they're in the middle of development. Most importantly, you don't want to do this on critical workloads, right? You want to do it on low risk workloads, and then build an exception policy that leverages automation and schedules. So that's a great one. The second one, failed AWS multi-part uploads. I don't know if you guys have looked at this. What often happens is if you have very large files and they fail, AWS will try again, but try it in another bucket, right? So if you don't remove that flag, oftentimes you'll find yourselves with large S3 buckets of just data sitting there that just failed. And those data costs add up. So a simple thing is really turn off the flag, or turn on the flag, turn off the flag. I forget which one, but yeah, turn off the multi-part upload flag so you can quickly identify that waste, right? So it doesn't accumulate. So that's a real easy one. That saved hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars, at least one time, because once you do it, you know that you don't you can automate it. All right, next one. This one is a great one. I learned this actually from conversations with other users of other FinOps practitioners about how to optimize your volume type, right? Oftentimes IO2 is the fastest. Your engineers would love to get the fastest, most performant IOPS. But in reality, you might not necessarily need that. And I learned this from several people in the gaming industry who weren't using IOs, right? And you'd think that they would use a lot of IOs. And I took that information back to our teams and say, hey, you know what? These engineers aren't using IO. Why are we using IO, right? And that kind of spurred them on to think, oh, wow, maybe we don't need it at this point, right? So switching down to GP3 saved a lot of money. I mean, if you look at the costs in there on IO2 versus GP3 and adjusting those IOPS, you could save a lot of money, millions of dollars. All right, next one. So underutilized compute instances. I'm sure this is a lot. This is probably a bane of existence of many people, especially in the FinOps world, where you're seeing really low utilization, right? And trying to get teams to right size it, they'll always come up with reasons why they need that really, really large machine. But once you start showing them the data that, hey, you know what, maybe you're not using that much amount, and then you start putting up in areas where people can see it, management can see it, then it kind of encourages people to further optimize. At Avalara, you could save, at Avalara, we did what we call the compute challenge. And we challenged teams to look at their compute and eliminate underutilized resources over a quarter. And that saved a lot of money. Millions of dollars, yep. And then unattached volume cleanup. This is probably, we should have ranked this from like easiest to hardest, but this is probably one of the easiest ones, right? Your unattached EBS volumes. That is an easy win. You know that you don't need it anymore. You should just delete it right away, or back it up and put it aside. But I think oftentimes people forget that once you kill an instance, you remove that compute, that EBS volume's there, and you forgot to reattach it, or you forgot to delete it. All right, and I think this is yours,
Yeah,
Victor.
yeah, thanks, Denver. I think that those six were pretty great. But we have six more to go. So let's start with also an easy one, that is the log and data retention. As you may know, logging is something that impacts a lot in development, security, so on and so forth. So you need to be careful about how much you log and how much time do you log in systems like CloudWatch or Azure Monitor or GCP logging, whatever, and how do you manage this to the storage bucket. So this applies to all providers I mentioned, and then depending on the org, the impact could be millions, and depending on the application, because I have the experience of having an error being popping every kind of 30 milliseconds. So if you log that every now and then it goes up to a lot. It was like half of the budget of the logging that we have. So that's really important, and you need to really be careful about what you log and what you not. So you align the retention with the compliance. It depends on your company. Then you set, of course, the different policies depending on the environment. Dev, it's one thing, but prod is different. And yeah, automate. Use tagging, use lifecycle rules to be able to use archival as well to save some money. And then continuing on that, this one is a bit more tricky, and it depends on your case. It will, make a lot of sense or not. It's basically the transfer costs. This is a very tricky cost to track in FinOps, because you can have transfer data costs between regions because you are doing a backup in region or the other, and you may be saving on the region, but then the data cost will probably removing that savings because of that. So you need to be careful with, if you have especially frequent backups with a lot of databases or things like that, then you can save a lot of money if you have this system in place. So you need to be careful about the traffic and how it's going, and of course the class and the user class that you have, leverage lifecycle rules, the archival, glacier, so on and so forth. You of course know that. Of course, tagging is always useful, and track and put the backup system where you actually need it, and then identify or have alerts when traffic is going between regions. Because if that's not put on purpose, then you need to reduce the amount that you are spending there, because it's something that you may didn't set up on purpose, and it's costing you a lot of money depending on the scale. Okay, so now, as you always read there, AI is the topic of the year. It's been there for a couple of years now. And GPUs are one of the main resource consumptions things in the cloud. So you need to be careful about if you are using it or not, because you may not be using it as much as you want, and those are expensive machines, from what we know about the shortage, and you need to have a cost-effective configuration in GPUs for sure. In this case, we saw the example of Azure, because you can have instances running multiple high-cost GPUs, and you can make them together, combine them with batch jobs, combining with grouping all those jobs in a single instance. And you need to be really careful about how much you are spending on here, because those are very expensive machines. So things to have in mind is tagging. Of course, AI, ML workloads prevent people from setting the pipeline departments that are not using AI, spinning up things. Then you start with the effort test environments, and then you limit the capability of those. And of course, automate policies and governance in combination with the tagging. It's really, really critical. And then, of course, the updates. So Lindbergh mentioned it for the IOPS, but it also applies here. Like when you have new versions, new families, you'll probably have almost free cost savings. So if there is no compatibility issues, you should definitely have to reevaluate after a new model changes, or after a new GPU version or GPU instance appears. And continuing with that, you need to be careful about what you pick when you are spinning up GPU workload. So before, it's about how you manage them, but now it's right sizing. Like you can have instances that are super big for the workload that you're going to do. So you need to be controlling how much workload has the GPU. And then if you are not using it, of course, shutting down, because if you have that spinning up, then and you're not using it, you are wasting your company's money. So you leverage the VRAM usage apart from the CPU and the memory that we always control, but you need to be checking the specific parameters of the GPU to see whether or not you are using it, because otherwise it doesn't make sense. And of course, avoid set and forget, or as a personal recommendation, do not train a lot of things on Fridays. As you recommend people to not to deploy on Fridays, I would definitely think that leaving training for Fridays is not the best idea, because you can have a surprise when you come back from Monday. So that's a recommendation from a previous AI developer back when it wasn't trendy. So I can tell you that could be a pain in the budget. And talking about GCP, because we've talked about Azure, We have talked about AWS, and now let's talk about a very specific GCP one, BigQuery. One of the principles, if you are especially into focus and the data set, you know BigQuery, you know how important it is, and of course, how much data it could manage. So if you are using data, creating data sets in BigQuery, but you are not using it anymore, you have a silent cost spinning up in your site. So you need to be sure that these data sets are either removed because you are not using it anymore or archived, because you otherwise are storing data on a quick access mode that you are not using. So as mentioned, if you are a data heavy company and you are very focusing to you are using BigQuery frequently, you should definitely take this into account and of course save a lot of money. And tips or best practices between it is automate, automate. This is everything about automate. Then of course the notifications and triggers to you get access, and of course review the access and the access patterns and the expectation we have, because you need to be careful also how do you access the data, how frequent you are accessing that. That's also another topic, that the queries and how much you are retrieving, so all the API information, same as happens with S3, that the API cost is also a significant part of what you are doing. In this case, probably takes more relevance for sure. And then, so just to conclude, we want to conclude with a bit of a quote. Policies itself need to be applied to the right sequence, to the right point, and not to make, because of you need to automate and you need to make governance of everything. Just pull the right automation, the right levers to reshape and to automate how your company is moving. Because if you define it and everyone is easy for them to use the policies, then you have most of the work done and they don't have to think, they don't have to reinvent the wheel to apply those savings. You'll have defined it in your policy, it's applied in your org, and then it's super easy to maintain. And with that, you have a clear definition of what is going to be done, and then, of course, apply it to every resources that you can. So this is going to be that's what we want to say. And of course, you will have the recording of this, so you can check all the policies and you can tell us how many of these do you apply. And of course, you can tweet this quote for sure. You can do whatever. But this is something that you need to take into account, and I hope you apply these 12 policies in your org, and you can get the benefits from it.
Great. Thank you so much. And I know we have a few more minutes. So if people have, I actually, what Victor, you said, if people have more policy ideas for FinOps, please put them in the chat window. What we'll do is collect them and maybe publish them as well. So we can share if they have other ideas, because it seems like people are giving. A few questions I saw. I think a few questions I saw that you mentioned, Lindbergh, is how do you do utilization check, right? How do you define underutilized? I know someone said compute optimizer stats and stuff. Like, how do you, which matrix do you use?
Yeah, so definitely AWS has compute optimizer. We actually utilize Stacklet's AssetDB to identify underutilized compute, and we define underutilized compute as an average CP utilization under 5%. And that's really, really low, right? I think a lot of you would probably say, oh, that's way too low. And I agree. The reason why we do it so low is to quickly find the easy wins, and raise that to our engineering teams.
Yep, absolutely. And I've seen like other people, like interact with a lot of community people, depending on the type of app. Like I've also seen, like, let's say if you have a Java app, you might want to look at memory metrics more than the CPU as well. So as long as you have the ability to check different metrics, and that might, like, the tool itself is great as well, but you have to understand what applications are running from application teams, talk to your engineering teams, and really kind of negotiate that practice as well, that, hey, we're going to use compute, or we're going to use memory, or whatever metric, and you can use a combination of that metric to create those policies. But any